Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mauricio, and I am one of 18 Reasons program coordinator, and I am here with Emilia, who is also a program coordinator for 18 Reasons. And so, what is 18 Reasons? So, 18 Reasons is a nonprofit cooking school, and our mission is to empower our community with not only the confidence but also the creativity needed to buy, cook, and eat good food every day. Thank you all so much for joining us, whether it be live or whether you watch our recording later on. Thank you so much for joining us and being open to online learning. So, today we will be having a food pantry demo, and we will be using the groceries distributed at the food pharmacy food pantry in downtown Oakland in collaboration with the Children's Hospital. So today what we'll be doing is that we will be working on a couple of recipes using these ingredients, and we'll be making brown rice jambalaya with shrimp, and we will also be making a strawberry peach crumble. So as you can see, we're making some lunch and a little bit of dessert too. So it should be great. I'll leave you all with Emilia, and she will be doing the cooking throughout. And yeah, me and Amelia will be chatting. And if you're joining us live, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I could read it over to Amelia, and we'll have a great time.
Hey everyone, thank you, Mauricio. I'm Amelia. I am so excited to be cooking with you all today. I don't know about you, but when I got my food pharmacy box, I was so excited about all of the good stuff in there. So we're starting with my favorite part, which is dessert. We're going to be making a peach and apple crumble. This is basically an any fruit you'd like crumble. Today we have canned peaches straight from the box, and we have a couple of green apples. So we're going to be mixing that up with a little bit of flour. We're going to make a really delicious crumble topping, and we're going to throw it in the oven. First and foremost, I preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Second here, we're just going to butter our dish.
And also, Amelia, I wanted to add, if you want to find the recipe, we have that in the description. So you could go ahead, and there's a Google Drive link, and in that link there should be the recipes. Both of the recipes are in there. So if you if you're following along, or you want to go ahead and do this on your own time, either way works. The recipe's there along with the equipment that'll be needed. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mauricio. And most importantly, we have the recipe there for your reference, but we want you to get creative. So I know the things in your box change it each week. The stuff at the grocery store changes each week. So the best part of both of these recipes that we're making today is that they are infinitely variable. So whatever you got goes great with these recipes. I'm just buttering my dish here. So I needed about 3/4 of a stick of melted butter for my topping. I just poured a little bit of that, maybe a teaspoon or two, into the bottom of my dish, and I'm rubbing that around. You can also use nonstick cooking spray. You could use any sort of vegetable oil, but this is just going to prevent our fruit, which is going to get really sticky sweet, from sticking to the bottom of our dish. Perfect. And once we do that, we can set it aside and move into our fruit. For our peach slices today, they're in pear juice. This is especially important if you're looking for canned fruit, because sometimes they're packed in syrup, and that syrup is going to have a lot of added sugar, kind of unnecessarily, because especially something like peaches are already so sweet. So canned fruit is a really great option, especially right now in the winter, because peaches obviously aren't in season, so they're going to be more expensive. They're not going to taste as great fresh, but they're still going to be really delicious canned, especially if you get them packed in juice as opposed to syrup. Even though they're packed in juice though, We're going to drain some of that off just because we don't want our crumble to be too liquidy. Just going to pour my juice off, and we're probably going to add a little bit of that back just to coat everything, but we're going to reserve it to the side for now.
Yeah, also great point that you made there with the canned fruits. Again, they're picked at their peak, and then they kind of preserve that. Again, canned fruits and veggies, they last a lot longer than fresh fruit and veggies, which may go bad from ranging from like a couple of days, maybe a week or so. And then canned fruits and veggies, they do last like up to maybe a year. So again, it's also a great alternative when something isn't in season.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Mauricio. Frozen is similarly good, and we're going to have a little frozen veg cameo later, which we can talk about more then. For my peaches, I'm just going to pour those directly into the dish. And you certainly can put that in a separate bowl, but I don't want to do an extra dish. Then I'm going to move into my apples. You may notice that our peaches are pretty soft. Our apples are going to be a little bit crunchier, and I personally really love the difference in texture. To cut our apple, we're going to cut the flesh off of the core. The way we're going to do this is cut directly to the right of the core. So we cut directly to the right of the core there, and we got all but one seed. Totally fine. Just pick that out.
Yeah, no one wants to bite into a seed whenever they're eating their dessert, right?
Agreed. I know. I said I like texture, but that might be a stretch. Awesome. And once we cut one panel off, then we have a flat surface, which makes it really easy to cut the rest of our apple. Not going to be rolling around trying to escape. And we can do the same thing, just cut to the right of the core again. Rotate it. Same thing to the right of the core. One more time, right of the core. And the whole core, just the seeds, totally intact. You can compost that. You can snack on whatever apple's still attached. Chef's treat. And then we're just going to slice our apples into slightly thinner slices than our peaches, just because they're going to be baking in the same dish, and the peaches are already pretty soft. So we want our apples to cook a little bit more quickly than the peaches do, which is why we'll do them a bit thinner. I'm just going to slice it into about 1/4 inch slices, and I'm starting on the sloped side. So I want it to slope away from my fingers and toward my knife. So just in case I slip, I don't hit my fingers. And then once I hit the top here, right where it's perpendicular with my cutting board, I can rotate it and do the same thing. So cutting slope side down. And if you get to, yeah, Mauricio.
No, go ahead, Amelia. I'll chip in later on.
No worries. So if you get to a point where it's really close to your fingers or you're not sure you can cut it safely, don't cut it. Your apple isn't nearly as important as your fingers are. So most important to just be safe.
Totally, and as you could all see today, we're using green apples. Those were the ones provided by the food pantry today. But again, it's always nice to try the different types of apples have a sometimes different flavors. So I know green apples are a little bit more sour as compared to maybe a Puhi apple or a Gala apple. So again, just keeping your options open, trying out new new varieties, and kind of see which one you like the most.
Agreed. And depending on the season, you can switch up this fruit. So today we have our peaches from the can and we have our apples. But if it were the middle of summer, you could definitely do this with berries. If if you wanted to make a berry crumble today, where it's decidedly rainy out, definitely not the middle of summer, you could use frozen berries too.
Definitely. And I've always wanted to try like because I've made an apple crumble before, but I've always wanted to try maybe. I know in the winter persimmons are always there's always a bunch of persimmons around, so I've always wanted to try it with persimmons, but maybe once winter rolls around again, I could give it a try.
Yeah, I love experimenting, especially persimmons are really nice because they're sweet and they're not super aggressively flavored. So they can go with a lot of different fruits. Like if you wanted to mix it with other things, it's not going to be like competing for flavor or dominating anything else you combine with it. And I'm just going to keep going until I mostly fill my dish. This isn't as precise as most other baking, which is why I personally love it. It's kind of just however much you'd like. And then for the crumble topping, similarly, we're not using any leavening, which means no baking powder, yeast, baking soda, which means our ratios don't have to be super precise like they do when you make other things. So if you get bored of cutting halfway through, just eat that second apple.
Totally. Or you could, if you don't want that much apple, you could only add one. So you kind of, again, like with most dishes, you could kind of just make it to your liking.
Oh yeah. And that's the point of cooking, right? To make things that are delicious for you, delicious for your family, preferably just delicious to you because then you get to eat more and you don't have to share as much, but you know, aim to please.
That's definitely a good hack. Just if maybe you don't want your family to touch your food, just put something in there that you know they don't like and they won't touch it.
I love it. All the pro tips here. Perfect. So at this point, all of my peaches and all of my apples are in here. I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is squeeze some lemon on top. This lemon is just kind of going to brighten everything up. It's also going to prevent my apples from browning before they go into the oven. So if you've ever cut or bitten into an apple and then left it on the counter, you may notice that it gets brown. That's just oxidization. So it's still totally fine to eat, perfectly good, but our lemon kind of brightens the flavors and also prevents that from happening. Just tossing it all together here. I want it to be a good combination of peaches and apples, so try to get those peaches throughout. Also, best tools in the kitchens, our hands.
Totally. And I know today we're making this apple and peach crumble, but again, there's so much more you can do with these ingredients as well. I know you could also maybe do a peach cobbler. I know that that was also one of the options we could have done for today. So again, you're not kind of sometimes I feel like with food pantry items, you just need to be a little creative with it. Maybe I know sometimes we you get similar items each week. So again, sometimes you just need to be open to searching up different recipes online and kind of see which one interests you, and you could kind of take it from there.
Oh yeah. You could even do this with canned pineapple. I don't see why not. Canned pineapple is one of my favorites. And right here, I just poured a little bit of my reserved juice from the peaches into the peach apple mixture just to give it a little extra sweetness. If you were using fresh or frozen fruit, then you could use some brown or white sugar instead. But I already had the juice, so why not use it up? The flavors of our apples and peaches will also concentrate once they're in the oven because some of that moisture will evaporate and those sugars will really come to the forefront. So they're going to be sweet no matter what, but putting a little bit of extra sugar or a little bit extra juice in there just hastens the process. Fruit, ready. Next, crumble. For my crumble here, I have half a cup of whole wheat flour. I have 3/4 of a cup of the oats from my pantry box. I have a teaspoon of cinnamon. You could use more if you really like cinnamon. Big pinch of salt and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Again, those ingredients and their quantities are in that recipe. So this is a really great all-purpose crumble.
Amelia, also, are the oats in there quick oats or are they old-fashioned oats?
Good question. These are quick oats. So they came straight from the pantry box. So everyone who got a box this week probably got these as well. These are quick oats and they're a bit smaller than you might be used to or you might have seen otherwise, which means they're going to cook a little bit more quickly. A win in my book.
And
You could definitely, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna ask, what might be the difference between like using quick oats in this recipe and using the regular old-fashioned oats?
Great question. The speed that it cooks. So your old-fashioned oats might take a little bit longer. They might ultimately be a little bit crunchier and like have larger pieces ultimately too. That's awesome. Totally fine. You can use old-fashioned oats or quick oats in this recipe. And sorry, kind of bright. Might be hard to see there. Maybe get another angle. I just mixed all of my dry ingredients together. So again, flour, oats, brown sugar, salt, cinnamon. Now, 3/4 of a stick of melted butter into my oats.
And also, Amelia, I know we talked about this before class, but just so everyone could listen on as well, what's the difference between just putting in this regular stick of butter and breaking it up and adding the melted butter?
Yeah, another great question, Mauricio. Thank you. We did talk about this. So I've made this crumble both ways. I've done it where I'm using cold butter and I'm crumbling that in. I've also done it with the melted butter. With the melted butter, I end up liking the texture a little bit more just because our oats get evenly coated in that oil or in the fat rather before they go into the oven. When you use the cold butter, they're still going to be really delicious, but your oats might be a little bit more crumbly and dry, which isn't a problem because your fruit is going to have so much juice. But I like melting it because then they're the butter is evenly mixed throughout. Does that answer your question, Mauricio?
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, totally. I've done it before where I crumble up the butter and then add it to the dry ingredients, and it is true it does come out a little bit drier, which isn't a problem. But again, if you do like that, if you don't like them as dry, again, using the melting butter is totally a great option.
Absolutely. And here's what my crumble looks like. So you can see it's good when it starts kind of sticking together. So everything's evenly coated. Now's a great time to do a little quality control. Take a taste. Ooh, so good. Brown sugar. Honestly, I'm tasting a little bit of salt, which I really like because the oat mixture with the brown sugar is pretty sweet, and so is my fruit. So I really like this. Very excited for the end result. A little salty sweet. Perfect. At this point, my fruit is ready. Crumble is ready. I'm just gonna pour that on top.
That looks great already.
I know, honestly. And I love a crumble because it gives you the same satisfaction of a pie, but it's so much easier. Making a pie crust is kind of a hassle, takes a lot of practice, but a crumble anyone can do with any level of cooking experience, and it's always delicious. Here's my crumble pre-oven. Next time we'll see it, it'll be post-oven.
And again, what was the temperature of the oven, Amelia?
Temperature of my oven is 350 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to cook it for about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on a few factors, how quickly my fruit cooks, how quickly my oats brown. But the goal is just brown, crunchy oats on top and soft fruit underneath. The way you can check this is first by looking at it. So if it looks brown and crunchy, then you're off to a great start. Second is by testing it. So you can either use a knife, you can also just use a fork, just stab into it with whatever kitchen utensil you're using. If your apples and fruit are soft, then you're all good. One comment, if your crumble starts browning before your fruit is soft, you can cover it with foil and that'll retain some of the heat so your fruit continues to cook without letting your crumble get overly brown.
Thank you for the tips, Amelia. We'll be waiting for that crumble to come out and see how it tastes. Hopefully it gets done by the end of the class, but if not, maybe we could say how it came out at our next class next month.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll note, in the recipe, it also called for 3 tablespoons of whole wheat flour to potentially put onto your fruit. If your fruit is really juicy, like peaches in the middle of the summer, or nectarines, or something that has a lot of liquid, then you should use that and it'll soak some of it up. Mine weren't super juicy because I was using those crisp apples, so I didn't use that extra whole wheat flour. Perfect. On to the next one. I'm going to grab my ingredients right now.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. So again, our next dish will be the brown rice and jambalaya. The brown rice jambalaya. So again, just to reiterate, the recipe is in the description. So again, that has all the ingredients, all the directions. It has everything you need to make this. And I don't know
Thank
about
you, Mauricio.
and I don't know about you all, but I had never tried jambalaya before. And yeah, totally, this is something that may be new for all of you as well. So again, it is always great to try new things, experiment, and use the ingredients to try new foods.
Agreed. That's why I love getting kind of surprise ingredients either from the pantry or from the grocery store, just because you can try them in new applications. If you find a recipe that you're really excited about, throw something in there that you've never tried before. Okay, so to start our jambalaya, Mauricio mentioned that he's never tried it before. Possibly some of you haven't tried it before. Now's a great time to do it. Basically, jambalaya is a rice dish that has all sorts of meat and vegetables mixed into it. That can be any combination of meat and vegetables. So today we're using some sausage. I had some leftover chicken thighs that I made 2 nights ago that we're going to use. And for vegetables, we're using some peppers, celery, carrots, onions, canned corn, which came from our pantry box. I also have some frozen peas. And the base for our jambalaya is going to be our tomato sauce, which also came in our pantry box. Let's get started. The way we build our jambalaya is by moving from things that take the longest to cook through things that take the shortest to cook. So, starting with our sausage and chicken. I have some Cajun style sausage. That's just what I had lying around, but you could use literally anything. Breakfast sausage, you could even use bacon. Something that's going to give you a lot of flavor. That's why I like adding sausage. I'm use 2 pieces here. And if you ever see a recipe that tells you to cut something on a bias, it just means to cut it at an angle. So today we're gonna cut our sausage on a bias, which is just to say that it'll have more surface area. So if we cut it into coins, then there would be less area here for it to get brown and delicious. That's the only reason why I'm doing it at an angle. If you didn't want to do that, you certainly don't have to.
Yeah, and again, as Emilia mentioned, it doesn't have to be sausage. It could be anything that you have lying around in your fridge. So it's a great way to kind of combine your food pantry items with items that you already have at home. So again, just making use of everything, something that's been laying around there for a couple of days. You could go ahead and again just use that, avoid throwing it out, and make a delicious meal.
Yeah, my favorite meals are the ones made from random leftovers or that piece of celery you forgot about in the back of your fridge. Using things up makes me feel good. I also have this chicken here. You could shred it if you wanted to. I'm going to cut it into chunks. Start by cutting it into slices. Then I can just rotate that. They're going to be about 1 inch each. So this sausage and chicken is already fully cooked. So the goal by cooking it first is to get some browning on it because browning is flavor. But if you were using like raw breakfast sausage or raw chicken, then cooking it first is to give it a head start. So it's finished cooking by the time your rice and other things are finished cooking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know the food pantry sometimes gives out like some chicken drumsticks. Sometimes they give out some ground meat. So again, if you're using that, for example, for this dish, just make sure to cook it first, and then, as Emilia said, doing that brownie later on to give it some more flavor.
Oh, and I'm just lighting my burner here, heating my pot. I'll give you a peek at that. So here's my pot. I know it's a little dark here. As soon as we start adding stuff, you'll be able to see a little better. But I'm preheating that with a bit of vegetable oil. This can be any oil. If you had olive oil, that works great. If you had butter, butter would do the trick. The difference between using those types of fats is their smoke point, or basically how hot you can cook things. So something like vegetable oil, you can cook things at a very high heat, whereas olive oil or butter, they're going to start to burn and smoke at a lower heat. So that's the main consideration when choosing what type of oil or fat. Awesome. I'm not sure you can see, but I know my oil's hot when it starts to run across the bottom of my pot really quickly. It gets a little shiny and shimmery. That's when I know it's hot and my stuff can go in. All of my meat going in. And while that cooks, we will chop our veg.
And as Amelia mentioned, you could use any type of vegetables you have. What vegetables will you be using today, Amelia?
I'm going to be using some peppers because I had them lying around, some carrots, some celery, onions. I had some frozen peas, which are a really great option. We were mentioning canned, frozen, fresh earlier. We can talk a bit more about that shortly. Also, the canned corn and the canned tomato sauce.
Yeah,
If
so
you had some zucchini or asparagus lying around, you could totally use that. Infinitely variable, just like that crumble.
yeah, and as you did with the crumble, you're using some fresh veggies, and you're using others that are canned, which is a great way to reiterate how you can combine all of these and still make a delicious dish.
Definitely. I know that my meat is starting to cook when it starts sizzling. I can also start smelling it a lot more, which is a good sign. Right now, like I mentioned, we want browning. So to the extent that you can, you want all of those pieces touching the bottom. It's okay if they pile a little bit, but you'll get more browning if there's less piling. And we'll let that do its thing. Back to the veg. Because my chicken and sausage were fully cooked, I don't necessarily have to wash my cutting board right now because there's no worry for cross contamination. But if my chicken were raw or if my sausage were raw, I would absolutely need to wash my cutting board. You could even cut your veggies first and then deal with any raw meat or dairy products. I'm still going to rinse it though, just because it's kind of messy.
Better to be safe.
Okay, clean cutting board, onto my veg. I like to have a bowl here just so I can put all of my cut vegetables into that bowl since they'll all be going in at the same time. The way I know that is because I've made this recipe before, but is by reading the recipe. So reading the recipe before you start cooking makes everything more efficient. I'm gonna cut my peppers.
And also, I see, Amelia, that you have like the smaller peppers, so those are usually sweeter than the regular bell peppers, correct?
Correct. And we are adding lots of pepper in the form of paprika and cayenne to season our jambalaya. So I think that sweet peppers are actually a really great option. Either the small ones are fine, the bigger bell peppers. I also know that sometimes the red, yellow, orange are more expensive. They don't taste super distinct from the green ones. So if I'm going to the grocery store, most of the time I just buy the green ones. And those work perfectly in this recipe.
Yeah, also I notice whenever I go to the grocery store, the green bell peppers are usually the ones that are on sale most of the time. So again, like you even mentioned, they don't have that much of a taste difference. So kind of just buy what works best for you.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why choosing recipes and thinking about cooking or thinking about recipes specifically as guidelines as opposed to directions that you need to follow to the T is important because then you can make decisions that are right for your family, right for your budget, and you don't have to worry about getting exactly the right ingredients.
Yeah, recipe frameworks are always great. Like definitely Jambalaya could definitely be one of those frameworks. Whether some other frameworks could be also, scrambled eggs. You could kind of again kind of play around with that, around also quesadilla, the stir fry. So again, choosing these recipe frameworks just makes I feel like even grocery shopping a lot less stressful. You could again kind of just work with what they have, what's on sale, what's in season. So again, just having these frameworks in mind whenever you go to the grocery store is always super helpful.
Absolutely. And I saw so much opportunity for that in our pantry boxes this week. There were all sorts of grains, all sorts of veggies, and things like peanut butter and tomato sauce. All of those things work really well to combine in different combinations. So you could do a peanut sauce with those spaghetti noodles. You could do spaghetti with those noodles. Today we're using the brown rice for our grain, the tomato sauce kind of for our sauce base. But you could combine all of those grains and sauces in so many different ways. Peppers into the bowl. I'm gonna cut my carrots now.
And I also see you have some seeds laying down, like Emilia, some seeds around there. But like with bell peppers, that's totally fine because they're not really spicy, right? Compared to, for example, a jalapeno, the seeds may pack a little bit more a punch.
Exactly. Yes, Mauricio, you read my mind. That's exactly right. So we don't have to worry about the seeds from our bell peppers being too spicy because they aren't spicy at all. Whereas something like a serrano, a jalapeno, or other spicy pepper, the seeds do kind of have that concentrated spice. So you want to be a little more careful when adding those. I mean, I'm into spice, so I usually like to leave some seeds, but not for everyone, I recognize.
And so right now you're just chopping those carrots into smaller pieces, more or less the same size, right, Amelia?
Exactly. The same size as each other, definitely, and similar size to our peppers. Because all of these veggies are going in at the same time, I want to make sure they cook at around the same rate. So for the same reason that we cut our apples into pieces similarly sized, but maybe a bit thinner than our peaches, we're cutting these vegetables into similar sizes because they're all going to cook for the same amount of time.
Yeah, definitely something you want to keep in mind. You don't want to have some of your veggies be crunchy and the others be kind of really soft. So kind of you want to make them all the same size just to achieve that similar texture at the end.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter that you chop everything precisely. It's just important that they're similar size. So however you get there, we want you to get there safely, protecting your fingers, but just cut everything into similar sizes. If you have to go back through them, that's fine too. Carrots into the bowl. And now's a good time. My
Oops, Emilia, looks like you're on mute.
And Mauricio, my sound may have changed. My headphones just died, but can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you totally fine, so that's all good.
Perfect. Let me show you all my chicken and sausage. Might be kind of loud over here. Sorry about that, but you can see that some of the fat has started to render, which is a good thing. This fat is flavor. So your chicken has some fat, your sausage has some fat, and all of that will coat our veggies when the time comes. You'll also notice I will notice. I'm not sure that you all can necessarily see, but you can see that my sausage is starting to get brown on the bottom. That's exactly what we're going for. I stirred it up, back to the veg. We're gonna let those meats keep cooking. Next, some celery. You also if you're making meat like that, or even vegetables, when they start browning, it might start sticking to the bottom of the pot a little bit. Totally fine, as long as it's not smoking or burning. Then those little brown bits stuck to the bottom are also flavor. So eventually we'll add that tomato sauce, and it'll kind of pick up those bits from the bottom and incorporate into the rest of our meal, which is a good thing. And celery leaves. You should give one a taste. If you haven't tried celery leaves before, they taste just like the celery, but maybe a bit more intensely flavored. I like them. You may not. If you like them, include them. Otherwise, you can leave them out.
I was just gonna ask you about that, Amelia. Like, what do we do? What can we do with the leaves? But yeah, myself, I've celery leaves before because I just assumed that you throw it out. But I'll definitely give them a taste and see if I like it or not.
Yeah, perfectly edible. So if you like them, you can eat them, but it's up to you. You're the boss. Celery into my veg. Last veg we have to cut up is an onion. I'm going to use about half of it because it's round. We're going to cut it in half first, and then we're going to dice it from there. We can leave the root intact because it'll help us when dicing it, and just cut a thin slice off of the opposite end. Helps us peel it really easily. And for dicing our onion, I'm going to do a few slices here horizontally. Protect your hand, leave it really flat on top, and make sure your knife is parallel to your cutting board. You don't want to angle up toward your hand. Once we have those horizontal slices, we can do some vertical slices here. We're basically making a grid. And once we have that grid, which you can possibly see, then we just go across for even dices.
And then something that you could do if you want your onion pieces a little bit smaller is that you could totally go ahead and mince them as well, right, Amelia?
Yes, for sure. So you can do that two different ways. You can go ahead and dice them and then just go back through them with your knife to make sure that they're all the size that you want. Or you can just make your horizontal and vertical slices a little bit closer together, and they're automatically going to be a little bit shorter or smaller. Sorry. I'm just going to pour my veg into the pot with my meats and then return back to you all.
So yeah, now our meats have been cooking for a couple of minutes now, and as Amelia mentioned, we're kind of working from what needs a little bit more cooking time to what needs a little bit less. So we've had the meat cooking in there for a couple of minutes. Now we're adding the veggies, and again they'll all cook together. All the flavors will mix, and then we'll continue adding the rest of our ingredients for our jambalaya.
One thing that's important as we add our veg, we can add a pinch of salt because it'll draw the liquid out of those vegetables, and it will soften them a little bit more quickly.
So I know for the rice Amelia, you already had it going, but do you have any tips or instructions on how to cook the rice for those that maybe haven't done that before?
Absolutely. So one of the most important, if not the most important ingredient for our jambalaya today is the brown rice that came in our pantry kits. So I pre-cooked mine just so we can have some jambalaya by the end of this. But the point of this dish is that you add everything to the pot. So you do meat, veg, tomato sauce, then rice, and you cook that all together. So with your dry rice, putting it all in the pot will take about 50 minutes total. But since mine is pre-cooked, it's going to take a little less time. To make brown rice, you want to increase the ratio of water. So with normal white rice, you might do 1 cup of rice to 1.5 cups of water. Whereas brown rice, you're going to want to do 1 cup of dry brown rice to about 2.25 cups of water. Next up, I'm going to add my spices to the pot. The spices we're using today are paprika, cumin, oregano, and I also added a little extra salt in there. I like adding them at this stage because they kind of bloom in the fat is what you call it. So they're going to taste even more flavorful because they're going to flavor the fat that we're using. So some of the fat that rendered from our sausage and chicken and from that vegetable oil initially, and it'll spread evenly throughout.
Yeah, as Amelia mentioned, she's using paprika, oregano, cumin, but again, you're free to add any other spices or seasonings that you would like.
Exactly. And after I add my spices, I'm going to go ahead and add my canned corn, which I'm draining the liquid off of. We don't need the extra liquid, so I'm just adding my corn to the pot. I'm adding this corn because I had it just like the rest of my vegetables. So the corn came in our pantry kit. In a future week, if we got peas in our or canned peas or other canned vegetables, we could use them in this application as well. Speaking of peas, I have some frozen peas, so I'm going to throw some in there. And then, of course, our tomato sauce. The recipe calls for 2 quarts of chicken stock, which is very important if you're using the dry brown rice because that liquid is what cooks your rice. Because my rice is already cooked, I'm just going to use this tomato sauce and I might add a little bit more water, but I'm not going to add the full amount of that chicken stock because my rice wouldn't be able to absorb all of that liquid. Oh, it smells amazing already.
I can smell it through the screen as well.
Yes.
Looks great.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention, so that tomato sauce, it's called pasta sauce, right? So you might think that you can only use it on pasta. That's not at all the case. Because we're adding so many other spices, we're flavoring it how we want it to taste. So for our jambalaya, we don't really want it to taste like pasta sauce. So we're adding things like paprika and cayenne, which will change the flavor to our liking.
Amelia, we also got a couple on the chat. Shauna mentioned that she loves cumin and that she might have missed this, but what protein are we using today?
Yeah, today we're using chicken and Cajun style sausage, but that's just today. Tomorrow I might have shrimp. You could also use ground turkey or other types of meats. So this is very variable, but today we're using chicken thighs and and pork sausage.
Thank you so much for your question, Shauna. If you have any more, feel free to go ahead and that. I don't know if you also missed this as well, but we do have our recipe. It's in the Google Drive link in the description. So if you want to see what else the recipe contains, you can totally go ahead and reference that.
Most important thing to do as you cook is to taste. I'm going to mix my cayenne in first, just because I don't want a bite of purely spice. But you got to taste it to know if it tastes good. And at this stage, it might taste really intensely flavored. That's great, because we're also going to add our rice, and that will kind of dilute some of the flavor. Delicious. Already loving it.
Just a little hot, right?
Yeah, I know. A little hot, but nothing a quick blow. Can't cool down. I'm going to throw my rice in, and then we're going to check that crumble.
Yeah, Crumble's been in there now for around half an hour, so we'll go ahead and check that out once Amelia puts that rice along with her jambalaya. So we'll check that out as well. Again, the recipe for the crumble is also in that recipe packet in the description. So if you want to check that out as well, you're more than welcome to.
We would be overjoyed if you did. The next YouTube Live, you report back. Let us know how it goes.
I tell you, again, if you're not cooking with us at this moment, again, do this on your own time. Let us know what you think the next time. And hopefully you all enjoy it. I'm definitely going to have to try this jambalaya sometime. So hopefully you all do the same. All right, and then once you have your brown rice in there, do you let it kind of cook all together for a couple more minutes, or how do you go about that?
Exactly. I'm going to let it cook together. I'm noticing that it's a little bit dry, so I'm going to add a little bit more water, and then after we look at the crumble, I'll give you all a peek. And that's a really good rule of thumb. Whenever you're cooking, if something looks like it's drying out or looks like it's sticking or burning even, just add a few splashes of water. Unless you're working with a large amount of really hot oil, in which case, don't advise that. Add a little bit of water and it'll slow that cooking process. Okay, crumble time. Now put something to protect my counter down.
How's it looking, Amelia?
It is smelling amazing, and it's looking very good. Smells so yummy. Okay, here's what my crumble is looking like. You can see, hard to tell through the camera, but it's definitely gotten a lot more brown on the top. And when I touch it, be really careful. Don't do this at home if you don't feel comfortable. But I can feel that it's starting to get crunchy on top. So that butter mixture on the top is drying out a little bit, which is exactly what we want. Because when that liquid evaporates off of our fruit, off of our crumble topping, then things get crunchy and really delicious. And like I said, the way we test this is by inserting a knife. My apples still feel a little bit crunchy. There's some resistance when I poke my knife in. So I'm just going to let it cook for a little while longer. But this looks almost exactly like it should when it's done. It might get a little more brown on top, and I love more brown, but as soon as your fruit is soft, then it's good to go. And because I'm looking for a little more browning, I put it on the top rack. So before it was on the middle rack, just so everything cooked evenly from the heat from the top and the heat from the bottom. But now I want the top to get more brown, so I put it on the top rack. Back to our jambalaya. Some of the liquid has come to the top. I'm just going to mix that and let it go to the bottom, but this is exactly what I'm looking for. I want it to be creamy and delicious. It's not going to be totally dry like maybe steamed rice is, but I have all of my vegetables mixed throughout. It's a rainbow of color, and it tastes good, which is the most important part. I'm going to give it one more taste, and then I'm going to call it.
Let's see, Amelia. Taste test, the moment of truth.
Taste test. Let's see how it is.
I have this habit also of always eating my food when it's really hot, like right out of the stove, and I always burn my mouth, but I just always do it.
So hard not to when you're excited for it.
And hungry.
What I'm noticing is that some of my celery is still a little bit crunchy. I'm happy with that because I like a bit of texture, especially because we have some soft things in there like that rice. But if you wanted your vegetables to be a little bit softer, you just cook it a little bit longer. If you're cooking it all together, like the recipe is written using that dry rice instead of pre-cooked rice, then you don't have to worry about your vegetables being soft or crunchy by the end. They're going to be perfectly cooked. One more taste. It's perfect. I'll throw it in a bowl. You can see what it looks like, but otherwise we are done.
Yeah, so those were our 2 recipes for today. I hope you all enjoy this, and I hope that you all definitely give these recipes a try. Like I told you all, I'm definitely going to have to give them a try. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's class. And again, we'll be back next month for another food pantry demo. So join us, and we'll see you next month. Amelia, did you have any closing words?
I do. Yes. So here's our jambalaya plated in a bowl. It looks delicious. It's steamy, perfect for this rainy day. But mostly, thank you all for hanging out. I hope you learned some things, and I'm excited to do this next time.
All right. See you all. Have a good evening.